When attending a graduation party, wedding reception, birthday party, or baby shower, what do you care about most? The graduate, celebrating the end of years of hard work. The happy couple, with a lifetime of love ahead of them. The birthday boy or girl who has made it another year around the sun. The new mother and her unborn baby. No, no one really cares about the people being celebrated, but the snacks. At these kind of events, my favorite, both to eat and to make, is a charcuterie board. As much of an expert I am on crafting the perfect board, though, I have no clue where the language and words surrounding charcuterie come from, which is what I have set out to do today. Let's begin with the word charcuterie, which came into the English language in the 1850s during the modern English era. Although today we use the word to describe the culmination of everything, cheese, meat, bread, etc., on the board, the word actually has a much more narrow, refined definition. Cold cuts of meat, especially pork, ham, sausage, etc. Charcuterie is a good starting point for our language analysis because the word is a borrowing from French, setting the stage for the upcoming words we'll go over. I hypothesize that although majority of the food items' names are French and Italian in origin, their food categories' names, such as cheese or nut, are not, being borrowed from other languages instead. To begin, we will analyze the cheese aspect, my favorite and arguably the most popular, of a charcuterie board. The word cheese itself came into English pre-1150 during the Old English era, before the West Germanic languages split from one another. It can be defined as a common food made from the curds of milk pressed into a solid or semi-solid mass and typically ripened. Although we inherited the word from Germanic languages, this is not the true origin of the word. Cheese originated and was ultimately borrowed from Latin instead. The first cheese I will be adding to the charcuterie board is brie, a creamy and mild cheese that has a rough, hard outer skin, which some people eat and some prefer not to. I don't mind it though. The definition of brie is a kind of soft cheese made in the Brie district. This district is found north of France, showing that the word, which we obtained during the modern English period in the 1870s, is French in origin. The second kind of cheese I will be adding to the board is mozzarella, another mild cheese that is chewy and soft in texture, commonly shredded and used as a topping for pizza, but typically served in a ball form on a board like this one. The word joined English in the 1910s, in modern English, just a little over 100 years ago. Its definition is a mild white cheese with a springy texture originating in southern Italy, stored in water or whey to keep it moist. As the definition tells us, the word is borrowed from the Italian language. As a little fun fact, mozzarella has been called the same thing since 1570, over 500 years, but before that, two shortened forms, mozza and mozzarella, were used. While cheese is Latin in origin, the two kinds of cheeses we used on the board, brie and mozzarella, fit my hypothesis that the names of charcuterie food items originate from the French and Italian languages. The next food group I am adding to the board is meat. The definition provided for meat in the Oxford English Dictionary is very vague. The flesh of animals used for food, especially excluding fish and sometimes poultry, and usually in contrast to the bones of other inedible parts. Any animal flesh, other than fish and chicken, fits this broad definition. What I find interesting about meat is that it's the base for several other words we use today, like meat ball, meat loaf, and meathead. The word has origins in the Germanic language and entered the English language pre-1150 in the Old English era. Up next is prosciutto, a chewy, fatty, salty meat which can simply be defined as Italian ham. The definition for prosciutto crudo is a little more specific. A raw, cured Italian ham, usually served thinly sliced, especially as an hors d'oeuvre. This meat is very divisive, as a lot of people dislike the texture of the meat and the sometimes raw taste it has. Personally, though, I love it. As both definitions of the word tell us, the word is borrowed from Italian with the 1890s being the earliest known use of it in English. While researching the word, I found an interesting piece of history about it that I would like to share. The word could have been introduced into English as early as 1777, over 100 years earlier, but translators thought prosciutto and sausage were the same thing, using sausage interchangeably in its place. This brings us to our next type of meat for the board, the previously mentioned sausage. Sausage can be defined as a preparation of comminuted beef, veal, pork, mutton, or a mixture of these, either fresh, salted, pickled, smoked, or cured, with salt, spices, flour, stuffed into a container made from an intestine, stomach, bladder, or other animal tissue. With that being said, I'm still going to use it. When I think of the word, I imagine it has a southern origin, as sausage biscuits, sausage gravy, and sausage dogs are super popular in Alabama where I live. However, the word is actually French, and we obtained it sometime in the Middle English era between 1150 and 1500. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, there are over 150 kinds of sausage, and I'm using summer sausage for this board. Although meat is Germanic in origin, both prosciutto and sausage are from the Italian and French, respectively, language, further supporting my hypothesis. After our analysis of different kinds of cheeses and meats, the most popular and sought-after food items on the board, let's switch to a non-animal product now, and the item that my mom undoubtedly steals the most of as I'm making a charcuterie board: nuts. A nut can be defined as a fruit or seed with a hard or leathery shell enclosing a relatively hard, edible, or oil-yielding kernel. The word was first found in English pre-1150, the Old English period, and was loaned from the Germanic languages. Now, let's look at two different kinds of nuts and see what their language origin is. Our first nut to be studied and analyzed is the almond, an oval, nut-like, oil-rich kernel with a light brown skin and a hard pitted shell, most of which are edible, obtained from the tree Prunus amygdalis. The kind of almonds I have here is wasabi-flavored almonds, my favorite flavor and a good contrast to the next nut we will put on the board. Almond originates from the French word amande, which begins with am, like the tree almonds come from, leading me to wonder if that is the original inspiration for the word spelling, and it then came into English between 1150 and 1500, or the Middle English period. Our next nut is not even a nut at all technically, but rather the process done to nuts to make them candied: praline. This adds a sweet element to our otherwise, at least so far, savory board, which is key to a good charcuterie board. A praline is a confection made by browning almonds or other nuts and boiling sugar. Here I have praline cashews from the brand Ozark, which happens to be my favorite brand of pralines, and my favorite item overall on the board. These are sold at Publix and Sam's Club, and I 100% recommend them. The word praline came from French, but they spelled it with an S, praline, which is an interesting difference in my opinion. We obtained this word in the modern English era and the early 1700s. Once again, we have added more foods with French name origins, almond and praline, to our charcuterie board, still going strong with my original hypothesis. Next up, we have the healthy aspect of the charcuterie board, the vegetables and the fruit, or the vegetation. Vegetation can be defined as plants or plant life collectively, the plants growing in a particular area, habitat, etc. It's not always edible, as vegetation can sometimes be used to describe weeds, bushes, grass, vines, etc. But of course, what I'll include on my board is the vegetation we eat. The word entered English from the Latin language in Middle English sometime between 1150 and 1500. Let's consider and prepare 4 different kinds of vegetation now: 2 vegetables and 2 fruits, and figure out where their names originated from. To start this section of our charcuterie analysis, we will look at every kid's favorite part of a charcuterie board: the vegetables. I will begin with the addition of carrots, an umbelliferous plant having a large tapering root, which in cultivation is bright red, fleshy, sweet, and edible. Now, I don't don't know what kind of carrots the people at the Oxford English Dictionary have, but here are my orange, definitely not red, crunchy, definitely not fleshy, earthy, definitely not sweet, and still edible carrots. Seriously though, where are their carrots coming from? The word carrot originates from French, and it was introduced to the English language in the mid 1500s, the early modern era. The next kind of vegetation I will add to the board is the vegetable broccoli. Broccoli is one of the cultivated forms of cabbage, the young inflorescence of which forms a close, fleshy, edible head, distinguished as green, purple, and white. Once again, I don't know what broccoli they're finding that is purple or white. That's cauliflower at the Oxford English Dictionary. But here is the green head of broccoli that I will be adding to the board. The word broccoli is Italian in origin and joined English in the late 1600s, the early modern English period. Now, we will move on to our two fruits of the board, which most kids will probably enjoy more than the previous two entries. The first being clementine. Clementine is a variety of small orange originally produced by an accidental hybrid of the tangerine and the sour orange. The word came from French and is the newest word we've considered so far, as it joined English in the 1920s, so modern English, just 100 years ago. This shows how words are constantly being loaned, borrowed, and taken into the English language, even recently and in today's time. Our second fruit is grapes, defined as any one of the berries growing in clusters on a vine and from the juice of which wine is made. Now, I sadly don't have any grape wine to pair with the charcuterie board. This is a family-friendly presentation, after all. But I do have a cluster of crunchy, sweet green grapes to add to our board. The word grape came into English from French in the Middle English period, sometime between 1150 and 1500. Although vegetation is Latin in origin, the four types of vegetation we've added to the charcuterie board, carrots, broccoli, clementines, and grapes, confirm my hypothesis that the names of common inclusions on a charcuterie board are French and Italian in origin, while the broad group they fall into is not. We have made it to the last part of the charcuterie board that we will analyze and study in detail, and a key factor in it since it acts as carrier for most everything, bread, also known as my weakness. Bread is a staple food made by mixing flour and water or other liquid, often with yeast or other leavening agents, to form a dough, which is then cooked, usually by baking. Like the word meat, the word bread is also a base for other words, like flatbread or cornbread. The word is once again Germanic in origin, like many of the other broad group names we have studied, and it came about in the Old English period, pre-1150. If I had to guess, I would assume that bread is one of the oldest words we have covered, especially when considering its huge role and inclusion in Bible times. I have cut up small, bite-sized pieces of croissants, soft, buttery, heavenly layered bread for the first bread item on the board. A croissant is defined as a crescent-shaped roll made out of flaky yeast dough. The word is French, which I think is the most obvious finding of the word so far, considering its overuse in French-based jokes. We borrowed the word in the modern period, specifically the 1890s, making it pretty new. The last piece of bread I will add to the charcuterie board is a sliced baguette, a long, thin loaf of white bread with a crisp crust. Forget what I said earlier, and by earlier I mean 15 seconds ago, about croissant being the most painfully obvious French word on the list, because I think baguette takes its spot. The amount of times I have heard people say, oui, oui, baguette, pretending to be French is astronomically high. The word joined our vocabulary in the Middle English period in the late 1600s. We have once again, added 2 more food items with French origin names to the board, croissant and baguette. We have also, once again, proved that categorical names come from a different language. Well, we have successfully added 12 French and Italian originating foods to our charcuterie board. Brie cheese, mozzarella cheese, prosciutto, summer sausage, wasabi almonds, praline cashews, carrots, broccoli, clementines, green grapes, croissants, and a baguette, spanning 5 broader non-French and Italian categories: cheese, meat, nuts, vegetation, and bread. For the sake of this project, these are all of the words that I will analyze, study, and talk about in depth. For the sake of eating, sharing, and enjoying the charcuterie board at my graduation party, though, I'm going to quickly, through movie magic, add some more charcuterie staples to my board. Jelly, which is French in origin, olives, which are French in origin, cornichons, which are French in origin, macarons, which are French in origin, pistachios, which are both French and Italian in origin, and pepperoncinos, which are Italian in origin. Now that we have our finished and beautiful, if I do say so myself, charcuterie board and have finished analyzing 17 charcuterie related words, let's have a bite together. So, we have a board that is, excluding the extra items I added, 75% French, with 9 items having French origins for their names, and 25% Italian, with 3 items having Italian origins for their names. If we include the 6 additional items, that percentage changes to 72% French and 28% Italian, if we count pistachios as an Italian word, which I did. First, let's create a French bite with our original 12 items. I will start with a piece of croissant as my base, then add the gooey brie cheese, and finally top it off with a praline cashew and a green grape. This is the elite bite. Next, let's create an Italian bite. I'll start with a slice of prosciutto, add a ball of mozzarella, and put a broccoli floret on top. I will wrap it up, and this is the perfect bite. Finally, let's make 2 bites combining both the French-based names and the Italian-based names. For the first bite, we'll start with a slice of baguette for French and top it with a ball of mozzarella for Italian and a piece of sausage for French. This bite reminds me of a mini pizza, just without the marinara sauce. My final bite will begin with the Italian prosciutto, then the French carrot, a French almond, and finally a piece of the French brie cheese. This one is a weird combination, but it surprisingly works. So, after creating the charcuterie board and analyzing the history of the food names used, what have we learned? Although charcuterie is very common at American parties and gatherings, it's a culmination of other languages and has deep history. As I hypothesized at the beginning, the food categories names have roots in opposing languages than the foods within them, which all stem from French and Italian words. I did find it surprising, though, that many of the food categories names came from Germanic. Before researching this project, I did not have a clue where those words would come from, but it is interesting that for the most part, they all have the same origins. If I were to expand on this project further, I would like to look at more categories names and see where they originated from. Perhaps I could look at fruit and vegetables separately, cracker, sauce, condiment, spice, or herb, if I were to expand on my word groups and make a further hypothesis about their language origins as well, seeing if they're Germanic like the ones I studied for the charcuterie board. According to Martina Hacker and her paper on French in the English language, the reason for French prominence in our language is 1. The numerical strength of French speakers, 2. The political domination of French speakers, and 3. The cultural domination of the French language. French words and their culture, such as making charcuterie boards, seeped into our lives because of these 3 main reasons. As James Cascado and Douglas Radcliffe Umstead state in their article about Italian and English, America is full of dialects known as Italo-American, American Italian, Italian English Pidgin, or the speech of Little Italy. These dialects they identify are clearly seen in our charcuterie board, and if you pay attention,
you'll notice it in the world around you too. Next time you're at a party, I'm sure you'll think twice about the food you eat and have an inquisitive mind about its linguistic history.